Hello all, we're going to do a little bit of a collection video. It's been a while since we've done one of these, but I'm going to share with you my SEGA Dreamcast collection without further ado. More specifically my import SEGA Dreamcast collection, which I've yet to do because my import Dreamcast games are in two places currently. So I'm going to do part of the video here with this backdrop, and the next part of the video there'll be a different backdrop. But there we go. So first of all, SEGA GT homologation special. I butchered that. Anyway, this is SEGA GT, and this Japanese version of SEGA GT is rather nice. I think it comes with some stickers, if I do recall. Oh, there they are. So yeah, this version comes with stickers, and it's double CD case. Yeah, it's a cool game. I like SEGA GT a lot. It can be quite difficult, but it's a very good game. Moving on to another double case here. That's Virtua Fighter 3 TB. Now I do have both these games in the PAL format, but the Japanese packages are particularly nice, and I think both of them can be considered sort of Dreamcast classics, and it's kind of nice to have them on both formats, especially when with this one you've got the Project Barclay disc, which was a Shenmue preview disc, which included in this version of Virtua Fighter 3 TB, and for all intents and purposes this version is a little bit better than the PAL version, so happy to have that. Another fighting game now, Power Stone. My PAL copy stopped working, so when I thought about buying another copy, I thought, well, I'll get the Japanese copy because it's got superior cover art, as you can see there. Great game, Power Stone, one of my favourites on the Dreamcast. A lovely disc as well on this Japanese version of the game. I'd say any Dreamcast owner who likes action fighting games must play Power Stone. Pen, what's it called? Triathlon. So this is a triathlon game with colourful characters, and it was it a launch title? I know it was early for the Dreamcast. There's a nice disc there, and it is a good fun party game that I can recommend. Often, I think, well, I was going to say often gets overlooked, but don't overlook it, it's fun. This is a Netto Golf, I think it's called, and this is a golf game with an analog stick swing mechanic, and it's okay. I haven't played too much of it, but it's nice. So I do like golf games, so that's another one I'd like to add to the collection. Buggy Heat's a great arcade style racing game. It's a lot of fun, holds up pretty well today, I think, personally. If you like that arcade style off-road, in this case racing type game, it's very good. I remember playing this as part of the Dreamcast demo that I had and really enjoying it, coming back to this demo quite a lot, so it was nice to pick up a copy of the game. This is of course the Japanese version. Soul Calibur, again a game I own on PAL, but this was one where it's a Dreamcast classic. I'm a sucker for Soul Calibur. I bought the Japanese version and it's cheap as chips, the Japanese version of Soul Calibur. I imagine most people bought Soul Calibur with their Dreamcast, if not picking it up slightly later. One of the greatest games of all time, in my particular opinion. Here's Sonic Adventure. So yes, again a game I own PAL, but nice to have another Dreamcast classic in its Japanese form. Not too much to write home about the packaging for Sonic Adventure. That's quite nice, the Japanese one. But yeah, I think Sonic Adventure was just a really special game when the Dreamcast came out. Speed Devils, lovely crack down the cover there, but it's slightly more affordable Japanese. It's a good racing game with a sort of Hollywood type theme. It's quite there's like events that happen as you race, like twisters or dinosaurs as you drive through a movie lot, and I think King Kong's in there as well, and it plays okay. I wouldn't say it's amazing by any means, but if you're after another driving game on the Dreamcast and you know, you've exhausted all the others you've got, then Speed Devils is probably the next one to get after you've played all the other ones. And Sega Rally. Again, it's a Dreamcast classic. Again, it's great to have the Japanese version running at full speed, as opposed to the PAL. I could be wrong. Maybe the PAL version of Virtua Fighter 3TB is all right. I can't remember if it was this or that which was better as a Japanese version. But I think basically just because it's not letterboxed. I think maybe they're both letterboxed, but the Japanese versions aren't. So it's again nice to have. So that's all the Japanese ones I have for you in this part of the video. I have a few American ones, of course, because I'm British, so these are considered imports for me. Tennis 2K2 is Virtua Tennis 2 under another name. Much cheaper to get this American copy than it is to get the PAL version nowadays. Iron Aces, again, it's cheap as an American copy. These are both new, these games were, and much more affordable than the PAL version. This is a flight combat game. And Sega Marine Fishing. Now, I have to admit, I've not played either of these games as of yet. I really enjoy Sega Bass Fishing, which I have as a PAL copy. So more Sega Bass Fishing can only be a good thing. And yeah, that's the American case for it. Not particularly exciting if you're American, I imagine. You've seen these knocking around. But yeah, there we go. So that's it for this part of the collection video. We'll see you again on another sofa, probably. And the scene has magically changed, but we're still going to continue to talk about Dreamcast games, specifically Japanese import Dreamcast games. So, next up we have Giant Gram 2000, which is a wrestling game, and it's an exclusive Japanese wrestling game, and it plays rather well. And yeah, it's in one of these bigger cases. Of course, the disc is in one half of it, but yeah, it's a great wrestling game. So if you're a fan of wrestling games, then and you have the ability to play import Dreamcast games, specifically Japanese, then I recommend this wholeheartedly. Next up we have a classic. This is the American version of Seaman. So we're going to be jumping between Japanese and American imports here, so I will point out what's what, but you should be able to tell. And if you're American, you'll know. If you're Japanese, you'll know. But Seaman is a game, I think, which is probably among the most famous games on Dreamcast. It is where you raise a sea creature in a tank, have to look after it, have to come back to the game daily, pretty much, in order to look after this creature. It will evolve, it will begin to recognize your voice through the Dreamcast microphone, and the game is looking after the creature and interacting with it and getting it to evolve into a little frogman. So it starts from smallest little creature all the way up to a frog. And yeah, here's a picture of him. He's got a face. It's all narrated by Leonard Nimoy, who of course played Spock in Star Trek. But that Seaman, that is one of the most unique games I've ever played, and it's available in English on the Sega Dreamcast through this American import. Next up we've got, well, we might as well stick on the theme of Seaman. This is the Japanese exclusive Christmas Seaman, which I think requires access to the Dreamcast clock to recognize it's Christmas, but also, I could be wrong about that, I think you need an internet connection. This is why my copy remains sealed, but I bought this as more of a collector's piece, and it was very cheap. I don't think I would have bought it if it was expensive, but yeah, Christmas Seaman was a very cheap pickup for me. I'm not sure how collectible it is nowadays, but in the Sega tradition of making Christmas versions of their games, I'm thinking of Christmas Nights into Dreams there, that's Christmas Seaman. I can say very little about it, but I assume it's it does something to makes the experience more Christmassy, I imagine. Okay, so next up it's another Japanese import. This is Spawn in the Demon's Hand, which is based on an arcade game. And yeah, it's similar to Heavy Metal on the Dreamcast. So that is an arena-based third-person competitive action game. Well, I think that makes sense. Yeah, so you can play up to 4 player. You're in an arena, you've got weapons, you attack each other. Last one surviving wins, pretty much. And yeah, it's got a really cool arcade feel about it. Fast-paced, frantic action, nice visuals, I'd say, as well. So I think this is available in a PAL format, but it's one of the more expensive or pricey games. It's fully playable in Japanese. If you're able to play imports, then the Japanese version is a little bit more affordable. At least when I bought it, it was. Moving back to a US game, and a unique US game. This is Sega Smash Pack Volume 1, which contains Revenge of Shinobi, Sonic the Hedgehog. I can't remember which, Virtua Cop 2, not Virtua Cop 1. Yeah. Golden Axe 1, I think. Yeah, Wrestle War, Vector Man, they're all on the back here, so you can see. The version of Virtua Cop 2 is unique and plays very well on Dreamcast. I would recommend it just for that. The emulation on the Mega Drive games isn't perfect, and I'm usually not much of a stickler for bad emulation, but when you know a game as well as Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Sonic the Hedgehog 1, you know it's not exact. And yeah, it's a bit rough around the edges, I think in the sound department specifically. But that version of Virtua Cop 2 is the best one to play, and it's got fun little adverts for Shenmue in the posters in the game as well. So it's definitely worth picking this up. So here's I was very excited to play King of Fighters Dream Match 99, which is King of Fighters 98. And this is the US copy of the game, and I picked this up initially after gaining the ability to play import games, thinking this would probably be the one to get. Unfortunately, this disc arrived faulty. I can't remember if I got a refund for it or not. I should have done, shouldn't I? But I still have the copy of it. So I think this actually came from the US, so returning it was difficult. But as you'll see later on, I have the Japanese version of this game, and there's a difference in the cover. A very odd, not just a colour difference or something, a very unique alteration that was made to this cover, which you'll see in a bit. So I'll put this to one side, and when I find the Japanese version, we'll talk about it more. Here is Grandia 2 for the American Dreamcast here, so it's T15. Much more affordable than the PAL copy of the game. Of course, it's in English, being the American copy. But yeah, so I picked this up. Basically, it's cheaper than the PAL version, and I could play it. So why not get this version of the game instead? Grandia 2, for those who don't know, is a very accomplished RPG. I'm not a huge fan of RPGs, yet my curiosity was sparked enough to try this one. I haven't played a lot of it, but I have a good friend who's plays through the whole game and thinks of it very highly. So one day I will play Grandia 2, but the time has not come yet, but here it is, so I have it ready. Now, a game I have played an awful lot on Dreamcast, and it was my first PAL Dreamcast game, was Dead or Alive 2. So this is the second release of the Japanese version of Dead or Alive 2. The first release contains what I think less features than the PAL version, whereas this version contains more than the PAL version, so they're all a bit different. So if you already played your native version, be that American or European, or PAL or whatever it happens to be, then this is the Japanese import version you want. It's also the cheaper of the two versions of Dead or Alive 2 in Japan. That original release seems to hold a very high price. Well, high in my book, reasonably high, whereas this version is a lot more readily available and therefore cheaper. So this would be the one I could recommend. I don't own the original release, although for completionist, the completionist in me, shall I say, wouldn't mind owning a copy of that as well. Anyway, that's Dead or Alive 2. So moving on to another fighting game, and again in quite a thicker case, just like Dead or Alive 2. It's just that sometimes you'll find that Japanese Dreamcast cases can be thicker. Those are two of the thicker cases, if you're interested. Comparing a thicker case with one of the normal thinner ones there. So there's a difference in some of these cases, and Guilty Gear X also happens to have the thicker case. At the time, this was amazing. There'd never been such a high resolution 2D fighting game on a console before, since this has been ported to the PS2. So subsequent versions are available on pretty much everything. So you can play a version of Guilty Gear on pretty much any modern console. But this is the original, this is the first one to be released of this game on a console. And if I remember correctly, you get stickers in this. Yeah. Or a sticker. So you get a Guilty Gear X sticker in this little package. So it's a nice one to have. It's a great game, and it still remains a great game to this day, despite there being so many other versions of Guilty Gear available. So it's a nice one to have in the collection. So next up we have Death Crimson 2. So Death Crimson is notorious for being a really bad Saturn light gun shooter. This is its sequel, which actually plays better than Saturn original. They did improve some aspects of the gameplay. It's a curiosity more than anything. It's a very weird game. As I say, the production values are higher than the original game on the Saturn, but it's still a little ropey, but reasonably enjoyable. But in a world where you've got the likes of House of the Dead 2 and Confidential Mission, then Death Crimson 2 is not a game that you need to rush out and buy for the Dreamcast, but it is a weird curiosity nonetheless. So you'll notice that there'll be a lot of fighting games in this video, because I love fighting games, I collect fighting games, and here's King of Fighters 2001. And yeah, it's a great game. I think with a lot of these SNK releases, there was two versions, so two different covers for these. So I haven't gone to the extent of collecting both covers, kind of pointless in my opinion. But that's 2001. I do enjoy 2001. I know some people don't like it because of the change in art style, but for some of the character portraits and such. And that does differ across different formats. So I think if you play this game on PS2, which it does have a PAL release of, then I think the artwork is different in that than it is in this version. So next up we have King of Fighters 2000, which was also included on the PAL PS2 release. When King of Fighters 2001 was released on PAL, it was released with 2000. At least to my memory. Could be wrong, but I'm pretty confident that was the case. So yeah, you can play this game on the PS2 on a PAL format. It's a good game. I mean, this is King of Fighters. There isn't a lot to differentiate the different versions, apart from some new characters. They intend to introduce some new characters. Most additions. Vanessa was a cool introduction here. I think this was her first appearance. That's the boxing character. She was a bit different and good to see, and I can't remember her name. She's like a sumo wrestler. She doesn't look like one, but yeah, I think it's a good entry in the series, as is the previous one we talked about, 2000. Here is probably one of my favourite fighting games of all time. It's Capcom vs SNK 2, and of course this was the second time that Capcom SNK came together, and Capcom created this particular game, pitting those classic Fatal Fury, Samurai Showdown, Street Fighter, Final Fight, and all those other franchises characters together, and this just is, for me, the best 2D fighter probably ever. And I know that's high praise, but there's so much there. If you like both Capcom SNK, you've got all those characters to play as. It's a well-balanced game, I think, but then again, I'm not a fighting aficionado. I can play through this game and complete it, and it's a good challenge. I think it's absolutely fantastic, and you can get this game on the PS2. So if you don't have access to the Dreamcast, this was only released on import. So Capcom vs SNK, the original game, got a release on PAL on Dreamcast. This one didn't, and neither did Capcom vs SNK Pro, which was the Pro version, the previous version. That did get a release on the PS1, and that was the first. Well, that was the game that I think really got me into 2D fighters properly. I mean, I played them before, but the original Capcom vs SNK Pro on the PS1 really opened up my eyes to how good 2D fighters can be, and this sequel just improves on that original game in so many ways. You've got 3D backgrounds in this, which you didn't have in the previous installment, and yeah, there's some nice variety there. There's some great music and just great solid gameplay, so I really recommend that game. So here we have it. I was picking up a few sports games because the American releases of sports games are quite cheap. This one was sealed. It's NHL 2K, and yeah, it's got a good hockey game for the Dreamcast. First, a good one to get. I'll just whiz through these games here. So this is NFL 2K1. Of course, football game, American football if you live in the UK like I do. World Series Baseball 2K1, and also I've got NBA 2K1 as well. So yeah, fantastic sports games, and when I have people to play them with, I'm quite into some sports games, so I shall give them a go. Here's the American release of D2, sequel to D. It was originally released on the Saturn and PC, not sure. Did it get a PlayStation port? Probably. D2 is a continuation of that game. I think it's quite far removed from the original D, from what I've seen of it, but it's not one I've got around to playing yet, unfortunately. But here's a look inside. It's the American version, so it's all in English. I got this when it was quite affordable. I think it still is, but I've heard this is one to play, so I have it in the collection. So next up we've got Dynamite Cop 2 or Dynamite Decker 2, which I think is it just called Dynamite Cop in PAL territories, but this was a sequel to Dynamite Decker, the Saturn game, which itself was a die-hard arcade. It's a little confusing. So when it was originally released on Saturn, it was a die-hard game, a beat 'em up called Die Hard Arcade. I can't remember if it's called Die Hard Arcade in Japan. I think it was called Dynamite Decker, hence why this is called Dynamite Decker 2, which is a sequel to that game. And you're on a boat. I played a bit of it in multiplayer. It's fun, it's over the top, it's quite silly. It's one of those to import titles that is definitely worth getting, but you can get it on PAL. It's just called Dynamite Cop, I think, and it's a little bit more expensive than this Japanese version. I'll apologise in advance if I'm misinforming you of anything here. Do pull me up in the comments if I've made any mistakes in my Dreamcast knowledge. But here's Tetris 4D, which is I think it's a Japanese exclusive Tetris game. There is a version, another Tetris game on the Dreamcast on PAL, but I think that's called New Tetris. I can't remember. But I collect Tetris games as well. And Tetris is the perfect puzzle game, and it is completely addictive and deceptively simple. It's an okay version of Tetris, it's not the best, but I haven't played it for a while. So if you like puzzle games, you might like Puyo Puyo 4, otherwise known as Puyo Pop, I think, in PAL territories. So if you like this sort of game and you're familiar with the Puyo Puyo series, you know, where little coloured blobs will drop, you connect multiples of the same colour together, create chain reactions, and try and fill up the other opponent's screen. It's up to 4 players. This is, at least I think this is a Japanese exclusive. I'm pretty confident it is. More fighting games. This is the second release of, oh gosh, now I'm gonna, Last Blade. So Last Blade, yeah, is a really good weapons-based fighting game from SNK, not too dissimilar from Samurai Showdown. And here's one of the best SNK fighting games for my money. It's Mark of the Wolf, Garou, Mark of the Wolves. And there again, I think there's a couple of different releases of this with different covers, sorry. But this is the next installment in the Fatal Fury series, and I think the last mainline Fatal Fury game ever to be released, originally released. I guess in arcades and Neo Geo home systems. This is the Dreamcast version, and this has been released on the Switch and the PS4. It's really Xbox 360. It's really readily available, so you don't need a Dreamcast to play this game nowadays. But at the time when I got this is probably the best way to play it, at least the most affordable way. So yeah, it's a pretty special fighting game with incredibly smooth animation. And you know, by now I like Tetris. Here is Sega Tetris, and this is a cool version of Tetris. It's very solid, plays very well. Developed by WoW Entertainment, who I think did Hitmaker did Crazy Taxi. Well, it's Sega Tetris anyway, and it's yeah, it's one of the more collectible entries, I would say, in the series. But it plays a good, solid game of Tetris. Okay, so there was a time when I was really into the manga of Love Hina, which is one of those harem romance mangas. Also there's an anime of it, which I never really got into. But I did like reading the manga, and at the time I thought, yeah, let's get the Japanese Dreamcast game. At that point in time, I had no knowledge of how to read Japanese, and my knowledge is still extremely limited, and I still can't play this game. But yeah, I own it. I don't know why I still own it. I could have sold this by now. There's really, unless I suddenly become fluent in Japanese, this game remains one of those that will sit on the shelf or in the drawer in the case of my Dreamcast games. So now we come to King of Fighters Dream Patch 99, which is King of Fighters 98 under another name. This is a Japanese version. So putting this side by side with the US version, you can see that for some reason they lopped off the front of Iori's hair. I don't know why. I don't know why that happened in these two versions. Maybe they thought his hair was just too far out, and there they lopped off the front of it. Or maybe it was a mistake. But you see the backs of the cases are incredibly similar. But yeah, it's a great game. For those who know fighting games, they'll know that King of Fighters 98 is one of the most appreciated entries in the series. It had the biggest cast of characters, I think, up to this point in a King of Fighters game. And it's great fun, and yeah, well worth having. Here's King of Fighters 99, another good entry in the series. I think I also have this on the Switch. Here we are. So Vanessa was introduced here. I think I said before that she came into it in 2000. No, but she was already in it in 99. It's his evolution, so I think this has 3D backgrounds as opposed to the original release of King of Fighters 99. And then we've got Godzilla. This was a launch title, I think, for the Dreamcast in Japan. It's quite novel to play as Godzilla and destroy cities, fight monsters. So yeah, it's quite a fun game. And just 3 more now. You've got Card Captor Sakura, and in this game I think you play as her friend, I can't remember the name of, who's videoing her on her card capture missions. There's also a little puzzle game in here. I've played very little of this. Another one like the Love Hina game that sort of linger in my collection, but because of my lack of knowledge of Japanese I can't really play it very well. But yeah, it's here anyway. Here's Capcom vs SNK 1 for the Dreamcast. I think I own this purely because I quite like the cover, because I have the PAL version of this game also. But there's also the Pro version of this, which is quite improved, and that features Dan, I think, from Street Fighter on the cover, whereas this has got Kyo and Ryu on the front. And last of all, Gunspike, or Cannon Spike as it's known, and this is in other territories. This is also released on PAL as Cannon Spike, but again it's quite expensive, so I decided to pick up the Japanese version, which is called Gunspike, and it is, yeah, it's like a shump, shoot 'em up type game, but where you're on land on roller skates and very arcade style. Kami's in it as well. As is, oh gosh, what's his name? Oh dear, that's Charlie. Charlie is his name. Charlie's in it as well. And yeah, it's another good fun arcade action game from Capcom. And because I've only got 1 minute on the camera battery, I'm going to have to wrap it up there. But thanks so much for taking time to watch the video. I hope you've maybe discovered a few import titles or gained some more knowledge about some of the games available on Dreamcast that weren't available in your own native territory. So thanks for watching, and all left for me to say is goodbye and game on.